What happens when one of music's most laid-back artists walks into one of television's most heated talk shows and everything goes completely off the rails? Post Malone's appearance on The View started as a routine promotional interview and ended as one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history. Before we get into what went down, make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below telling us what you think really happened here. The studio lights were bright as Post Malone walked onto The View, set to a mix of applause and curious whispers from the audience. He settled into the guest chair, his tattooed hands folded calmly in his lap, a slight smile on his face. The panel sat ready, Whoopi Goldberg in the center, Joy Behar to her left, and the rest of the co-hosts spread across the table. Whoopi started things off friendly enough. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Your new album just dropped and it's getting incredible reviews. Tell us about the creative process this time around. Post leaned forward, speaking in his characteristic relaxed tone. Yeah, thank you for having me. This album was different. I wanted to strip things back, get real honest about where I've been mentally the past couple years. A lot of it deals with fame, isolation, trying to stay authentic when everyone's got an opinion about who you should be. Sonny Hostin jumped in next. That authenticity is something your fans really connect with. You've always been open about your struggles. How do you balance being vulnerable with maintaining some privacy? It's tough, Post replied, nodding. I think you put out what feels right in the moment. Some things are for the music, some things are just for me. But I try to be honest because I know there are people out there dealing with the same stuff. And if my music helps them feel less alone, that's worth it. The conversation flowed naturally for a few more minutes. Questions about upcoming tours, collaborations, his evolution as an artist. Post answered each one thoughtfully, the audience warming to him. Then Joy Behar shifted in her seat, and something in the energy changed. So Post, Joy began, her voice carrying that edge she's known for. You've made a lot of money in this industry. Millions and millions. And you're sitting here talking about isolation and authenticity. But isn't there something a little, disingenuous about a multi-millionaire complaining about how hard fame is? The studio went quiet. Post's expression didn't change much, but you could see him processing the question. I don't think I was complaining, he said carefully. I was just being honest about the experience. But come on, Joy continued, leaning forward now. You chose this life. Nobody forced you to become a superstar. You could walk away tomorrow if you really wanted to. So when you talk about isolation, it feels a bit like, cry me a river, Whoopi tried to interject. Joy, I think what he's saying is that success doesn't automatically equal happiness. I know that, Whoopi, Joy, shot back, not breaking eye contact with Post, but there's a difference between acknowledging that and constantly playing the victim when you're living a life 99% of people would kill. 4. Post sat up straighter, his jaw tightening slightly. I've never played the victim, not once. I've always said I'm grateful for what I have. But just because I'm successful doesn't mean I'm not allowed to be human or talk about real feelings. Real feelings, Joy repeated, almost mockingly. Let me ask you something. When you're on your private jet or in your mansion, are these real feelings still bothering you? Or do they conveniently disappear when you're enjoying all that money? The audience let out a collective gasp. This wasn't playful banter anymore. This was getting personal. That's not fair, Post said, his voice still controlled, but with an edge creeping in. You don't know anything about my life beyond what you see on TMZ or whatever. You don't know what I deal with privately. You're right, I don't, Joy conceded, but her tone suggested she wasn't backing down. But you're the one who puts it in your music, who talks about it in interviews. You can't have it both ways. You can't be the tortured artist and then get upset when someone points out the contradiction. What contradiction? Post asked, his voice rising slightly. That I can be grateful and still struggle. That I can love my career and still find parts of it difficult. That's not a contradiction, that's being a complete person. Anna Navarro tried to redirect. I think what Joy might be getting at, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joy, is that there's a disconnect sometimes between celebrity struggles and real-world struggles. People watching at home who can't pay their rent might have trouble relating. And I get that, Post said, turning to Anna. I completely get that. I'm not comparing my problems to someone who's struggling to survive. But I don't think we should pretend that mental health issues only matter if you're poor. Depression doesn't check your bank account. Joy wasn't letting up, but you have access to the best therapists, the best treatment, the best everything. So forgive me if I'm not crying for you when you're sad in your recording studio that probably costs more than most people's houses. Why are you being so hostile? Post asked directly, his calm demeanor cracking. I came here to talk about my music, to have a conversation. I didn't come here to be attacked for having feelings. I'm not attacking you, Joy said, though her tone suggested otherwise. I'm challenging you. There's a difference. You're in the public eye. You're influential. When you complain about your life, what message does that send? I'm not complaining, Post insisted, frustration evident now. There's a difference between expressing genuine emotion and complaining. I work hard, I appreciate my fans, I try to use my platform responsibly, but I'm also a real person who experiences real emotions. Why is that so hard for you to accept? Whoopi tried again to mediate. I think we're talking past each other here. Post. Nobody's saying you can't have feelings. Joy, I think you're being a bit harsh, am I? Joy turned to Whoopi. Or am I just saying what a lot of people are thinking? This whole celebrity mental health thing has become trendy, and sometimes it feels performative. That word, performative, seemed to hit a nerve. Post's face flushed slightly. Performative? You think I'm performing? Lady, I've been hospitalized. I've struggled with substance abuse. I've had nights where I didn't want to wake up. That's not performance. That's my life. The studio went dead silent. Even Joy seemed taken aback by the rawness of that statement, but she recovered quickly. And I'm sorry you went through that, she said, though her voice lacked warmth. But you're still here. You're still successful. You're still making money. At some point, don't you have a responsibility to move past it instead of building a brand around trauma? A brand? Post's voice was incredulous now. You think I built a brand around my trauma? I make music about my experiences, just like every other artist in history. Bob Dylan did it. Joni Mitchell did it. Kurt Cobain did it. But when I do it, it's a brand. Those artists had something to say beyond their personal pain. Joy countered. They spoke to bigger issues, cultural moments. What are you speaking to besides your own feelings? This was the moment where everything shifted. You could see it in Post's face, the way his expression hardened, the way he leaned forward in his chair. What am I speaking to? He repeated slowly. I'm speaking to a generation that's drowning in anxiety and depression. I'm speaking to kids who feel like they don't fit in anywhere. I'm speaking to people who put on a smile every day while falling apart inside. That's what I'm speaking to. And if you can't see that, if you think it's just self-indulgent whining, then maybe you're too disconnected from what real people are going through to have this conversation. The audience erupted in scattered applause, but Joy wasn't done. Too disconnected? Joy's eyebrows shot up. I've been in this business for decades. I've interviewed everyone from presidents to activists to artists to actuists who actually changed culture. So don't lecture me about being disconnected. Then maybe you've been in it too long. Post fired back, his voice steady but sharp. Maybe you've forgotten what it's like to be young and scared and trying to figure out who you are. Maybe you've gotten so comfortable up here on this stage that you can't relate to people anymore. The other co-hosts exchanged glances, clearly unsure whether to jump in or let this play out. Whoopi opened her mouth to speak, but Joy was already responding. Comfortable. You want to talk about comfortable? You're a 20-something millionaire who made a career out of mumbling over beats and covering yourself in tattoos. I worked for everything I have. I fought my way up in comedy when women weren't welcome. So yeah, maybe I don't have a lot of sympathy for someone who struck gold and now wants to act tortured about it. There it is, Post said, a bitter laugh escaping. You think because I'm young and I make a certain kind of music that I didn't earn what I have. You think it just fell into my lap, did it not? Joy challenged. Right place, right time, right sound. You blew up on the internet. That's not exactly clawing your way through comedy clubs for 20 years. You have no idea what you're talking about, Post said, his voice rising. I spent years making music in my bedroom, getting rejected, being told I wasn't good enough, that I didn't fit any genre, that I'd never make it. I worked every single day to get where I am. Just because my path looked different than yours doesn't mean it was easy. Sarah N. finally spoke up, her voice cautious. I think we can acknowledge that everyone's journey is different and everyone's struggles are valid without comparing them. Thank you, Post said, turning to Sarah briefly before looking back at Joy. That's all I'm trying to say. My struggles don't invalidate anyone else's. But mine are still real. Joy wasn't softening. Fine, they're real. But when you have millions of fans, mostly young impressionable kids, and you're constantly putting out this message that life is painful and hard and isolating, what are you actually accomplishing? Are you helping them, or are you just validating their worst feelings? I'm letting them know they're not alone. Post shot back immediately. Do you know how many messages I get from people telling me my music saved their life? That it helped them through their darkest moments, that they felt understood for the first time. That's what I'm accomplishing. Or maybe, Joy countered, leaning back in her chair with her arms crossed, you're romanticizing pain. Maybe you're making depression seem artistic and cool, instead of encouraging people to actually get help. Post's face reddened. That's ridiculous. I've been open about therapy, about getting help, about medication. I've never once said, don't get treatment. But I also think people deserve to hear honest music that reflects real emotions, not some sanitized version where everything's sunshine and rainbows. Nobody's asking for sunshine and rainbows, Joy said, but there's a difference between honesty and wallowing, and a lot of your generation seems to prefer wallowing. My generation, Pose repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. Now you're going after an entire generation. You know what? Maybe the problem isn't that we're wallowing. Maybe the problem is that your generation told us to suck it up and deal with it. And that led to sky-high rates of addiction and depression and people suffering in silence. Maybe we're just done pretending everything's fine when it's not. The audience reaction was split now, some applauding Post, others sitting in stunned silence. Alyssa Farah Griffin jumped in, trying to find middle ground. I think there's merit to both perspectives here. Post, your openness has helped a lot of people. Joy, your point about responsibility and messaging is valid too. Maybe we're just seeing a generational divide in how we talk about mental health. It's not a divide, Joy insisted. It's a reality check. Life is hard for everyone. It always has been. But previous generations didn't have the luxury of making albums about their feelings. They had to work, survive, push through, and look where that got them. Post interjected. Look at the rates of untreated trauma, the substance abuse, the broken families. That whole suffer in silence mentality didn't work. It just created more pain. So your solution is to broadcast your pain to millions of people? Joy asked. To make it your entire identity. It's not my entire identity, Post said, his frustration boiling over. If you actually listened to my music instead of just judging it, you'd know I also make songs about love, about hope, about good times with friends. But you don't care about that because it doesn't fit your narrative that I'm some whiny kid who can't handle success. Joy pointed a finger at him. Don't put words in my mouth. I never said you can't handle success. I said I find it tiresome when wildly successful people act like victims. And I never said I was a victim. Post shouted back, losing his composure now. Not once. I said, I'm human. I said, I have feelings. Why is that so threatening to you? It's not threatening, Joy replied, her voice sharp. It's annoying. You know what's threatening? Real problems, poverty, discrimination, violence. Those are things worth complaining about. Not whether your feelings are hurt because fame is hard. Oh my God, Post said, running his hands over his face. You're completely missing the point. I'm not comparing my problems to those things, nobody is. But you're acting like unless you're facing the absolute worst circumstances possible, you have no right to struggle. That's insane. Whoopi finally stepped in more forcefully. Okay, I think we need to take a breath here. This got heated fast. Because she's attacking me, Post said, gesturing toward Joy. I came here in good faith, and she's been hostile from the jump. I'm asking tough questions, Joy corrected. That's my job. No, you're being condescending and dismissive, Post countered. There's a difference between tough questions and just being mean. Joy laughed. A short, sharp sound. Being mean. This is mean. Try doing stand-up in the 70s as a woman. Try getting told you're not funny because of your gender. Try actually facing adversity. You don't think I've faced adversity? Post asked, his voice dropping lower, more dangerous. You don't think I've been told I'm not really hip-hop, not really rock, not really country, that I don't belong anywhere? You don't think I've dealt with addiction, with losing people I love, with hating myself? Just because my bank account is healthy doesn't mean my mind is. Then get help, Joy said bluntly. Stop making albums about it and get professional help. I have help, Post practically yelled. I see a therapist twice a week. I take medication. I work on myself every single day. But that doesn't mean I can't also make art about my experiences. That's what art is. It's processing life through creativity. Joy shook her head. When I was your age, art meant something bigger than yourself. It meant commenting on society, on injustice, on the human condition beyond your personal feelings. My personal feelings are part of the human condition, Post argued. Mental health is part of the human condition. The fact that you can't see that is exactly the problem. You want art to be about everything except what people actually feel. I want art to matter, Joy said. I want it to challenge people, to make them think, to inspire change, not just validate their sadness. My music does matter, Post said, his voice breaking slightly with emotion. It matters to the people, it helps. It matters to the kids who write me letters saying they didn't take their own life because they heard my song and felt less alone. That matters. Just because it doesn't matter to you doesn't mean it's worthless. For a moment, Joy seemed to pause, but then she pressed on. And how many of those kids are just using your music as an excuse to stay stuck in their sadness instead of working to get better? That question seemed to hit Post harder than anything else she had said. His face went pale, then flushed again with anger. That is the most ignorant, harmful thing you've said this entire interview, he said slowly, his voice shaking. You're blaming me for other people's mental illness. You're suggesting that my honesty is keeping people sick. Do you have any idea how damaging that perspective is? I'm suggesting, Joy said carefully, that maybe your influence comes with more responsibility than you want to accept. I accept plenty of responsibility, Post said, but I'm not responsible for fixing everyone's problems. I'm a musician, not a therapist. I make music that's honest. What people do with that is up to them. But maybe it should be up to you, Joy pressed. Maybe when you have that platform, when you have that influence, you need to think harder about the messages you're sending. Post stood up from his chair, the sudden movement making everyone freeze. He wasn't leaving, but he was done sitting down for this. You want to talk about messages? Let's talk about the message you're sending right now. You're telling everyone watching that if you're successful, you don't get to have problems. You're telling people that mental health only matters if you're poor. You're saying that honest emotional expression is whining. Those are dangerous messages. Whoopi stood as well, her hands up in a calming gesture. Post, please sit down. Let's all just take a second. No, Post said firmly, though he wasn't aggressive, just adamant. I'm tired of sitting here being lectured by someone who clearly has no respect for what I do or who I am. I came here to talk about music. I didn't come here to be psychoanalyzed and insulted by someone who's decided I'm everything wrong with my generation. Joy remained seated, but her posture was rigid. If that's what you took from this conversation, then maybe you're more sensitive than I thought. Sensitive, Post repeated with a hollow laugh. That's always the insult, isn't it? When men talk about feelings, they're sensitive. They're weak. They need to toughen up. That's exactly the toxic mentality that's killing people. Literally killing them. Don't be dramatic, Joy said dismissively. Dramatic. Post's voice rose again. Men account for over 70% of deaths by their own hand in this country. And you know why? Because they're taught that talking about feelings is weakness. Because people like you tell them to just deal with it. So no, I'm not being dramatic. I'm being realistic. Sunny Hostin spoke up, her voice measured. Post, I think what you're doing is important. I think Joy's concerns come from a different perspective. But I don't think anyone here is trying to diminish mental health issues. Really? Post turned to Sunny, because that's exactly what it feels like. She's been diminishing them this entire time. Every single thing I've said, she's shot down. Every experience I've shared, she's invalidated. If that's not diminishing mental health, I don't know what is. Joy finally stood as well, matching his energy. I haven't invalidated anything, I've challenged you. And the fact that you can't tell the difference proves my point. You're so used to everyone agreeing with you, so used to fans worshiping everything you say, that the second someone pushes back, you fall apart. I'm not falling apart, Post said through gritted teeth. I'm standing up for myself and for everyone who's ever been made to feel like their pain doesn't matter because they have money or success or whatever arbitrary standard you want to set. My standard isn't arbitrary, Joy countered. My standard is perspective. My standard is gratitude. My standard is recognizing that despite your struggles, you're still incredibly privileged. I've never denied my privilege, Post shot back. Not once, but privilege doesn't equal happiness. Privilege doesn't cure depression. Privilege doesn't make trauma disappear. And the fact that you think it should is honestly sad. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. The other co-hosts looked like they wanted to intervene but didn't know how. This had gone so far beyond a normal interview. You know what I think is sad? Joy said, her voice cutting. I think it's sad that someone with your resources, your opportunities, your platform, chooses to focus so much energy on how hard your life is. Imagine if you used that platform to highlight people who are really struggling, people who don't have your advantages. I do, Post said, his voice strained with frustration. I donate millions to charity. I visit hospitals. I work with mental health organizations. I use my platform constantly to support causes I believe in. But you don't know that because you didn't bother to research me beyond your preconceived notions. I know plenty about you, Joy insisted. You know what you've decided about me, Post corrected. You decided before I even walked out here that I was some spoiled rich kid who makes sad music and complains too much. You weren't interested in having an actual conversation. You just wanted to prove your point. Joy's eyes narrowed. My point is that your generation needs to stop navel-gazing and start doing something productive with your pain. What do you think music is? Post practically shouted. What do you think art is? It's taking pain and turning it into something that connects people, that helps people, that creates meaning. That is productive. Just because it doesn't look like what your generation did doesn't make it less valuable. Your generation loves to act like they invented struggle, Joy said, like nobody before you ever felt sad or anxious or depressed. We all did. We just didn't make it our whole personality. Post laughed bitterly. No, you just self-medicated in silence and pretended everything was fine. You just passed your trauma down to your kids and told them to deal with it. You just created a society where asking for help was shameful. Congratulations on that legacy. How dare you, Joy said, her voice low and dangerous now. How dare I? What? Post challenged. Tell the truth. Point out that maybe the way things were done before wasn't perfect. You've been judging me this entire time, but the second I judge back, suddenly I'm out of line. Whoopi stepped between them physically now, her presence commanding. Okay, that's enough. From both of you, this has gotten completely out of hand. Post took a step back, running his hands through his hair. You could see him trying to regain composure, taking deep breaths. Joy crossed her arms, her jaw set. I think we need to wrap this up, Whoopi said, looking between them. This clearly wasn't what anyone expected today. Post looked directly into the camera, bypassing the hosts entirely. To anyone watching this who struggles with mental health, who's ever been told their feelings don't matter because of their circumstances, who's been made to feel weak for being honest, I see you. Your pain is valid. Your experience is real. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Joy scoffed audibly. Of course, Make yourself the hero of this story." Post turned back to her, and for the first time, his expression wasn't angry. It was just tired, disappointed. "I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm trying to be honest. Something you clearly have no interest in." "I've been nothing but honest," Joy retorted. "No," Post said quietly. "You've been cruel. There's a difference." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Joy opened her mouth to respond, then seemed to think better of it. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and loaded. Whoopi cleared her throat. "Well, this has certainly been one of our more intense interviews. Post, your new album is out now. Despite everything, we appreciate you coming on." Post nodded slowly, not taking his eyes off Joy. "Thanks for having me, though I'm not sure appreciate is the word I'd use." He started to walk off the set, then paused and turned back one more time. "You know what the saddest part of this is? You could have actually had an interesting conversation about mental health, about generational differences, about art and responsibility. But you were so committed to your narrative, so determined to put me in my place, that you missed the opportunity. That's on you, not me." With that, he walked off, leaving the co-host sitting in stunned silence. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay quiet. A few people clapped hesitantly, but mostly there was just a thick, awkward tension filling the studio. Joy was the first to speak, her voice defensive. "Well, someone had to ask the tough questions. There's tough questions and then there's that," Sarah N. said softly, shaking her head. Sunny nodded in agreement. "I think that crossed a line." "Joy." Whoopi looked exhausted. "Let's go to commercial." As the cameras cut away, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. This wasn't just a heated interview. This was a moment that would be replayed and debated for weeks. Post Malone had been pushed to his breaking point on live television, and the conversation touched on something deeper, a fundamental divide in how different generations view vulnerability, success, and mental health. So what do you think? Was Joy Behar right to challenge Post Malone the way she did, or did she cross the line? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more breakdowns of the most explosive moments in entertainment.